It seems like you can't throw a rock without hitting a dweeb with the critical drinker takedown video. I mean, I get it. He's the biggest critic on YouTube and spits in the face of the pro-woke and woke sympathizers. So he's their #1 target. And while no one is above criticism, almost all to a T they're guilty of the very thing they accuse Drinker of being. Ideologically captured shallow dipshits who hyperbolically label Drinker with every istanphobe they can smear his name with absolutely dreadful evidence to back it up. And the video I'm covering today is the perfect example. In fact, it's so mind-numbingly bad, a large portion of people will think it's satire.
What?
You serious?
The illusory truth effect is a phenomenon that was first detailed in a 1977 study. It's the inclination of people to believe false information after being exposed to that false information many times. Repeated exposure to lies caused the false information to feel familiar to the participants.
Get on with it! Yes, get on with it!
Further studies showed that the illusory truth effect could even make people have false memories, and that people with names that were easier to pronounce were more readily believed by participants of the study. This is a powerful psychological tool that grifters employ on their audience, and its effects are seen every single day.
Get on with it!
How many times have you heard vaccines cause autism or go woke, go broke? There is a reason these people repeat these mantras over and over, even in the face of conflicting evidence, and that's because repeating false information makes it more likely to be believed. Here's a network graph of the phrase go woke, go broke on Twitter from August 2022 to February 2023. The blue represents left-leaning users, while the red represents right-leaning users. The irony of the shape formed by right-wingers isn't lost on me. A literal dickhead.
Are you really retarded? Cool. Great job, man.
Wow, what a waste of time. You should have just skipped 2 minutes of trying to say in an intellectual way that your opponents are lying and in an echo chamber, and just cut to the chase. Oh, and nice job putting vaccines cause autism and go woke, go broke together. Because yes, those two statements are on the same level of validity. Can you not see a strong correlation that things that are woke in entertainment tend to be failures? I get correlation isn't causation. Of course, not every case is true, but that doesn't invalidate the statement. Just like,
Come on, Evie, faster.
Patience is a virtue.
Not right now, it isn't.
seriously, how many examples do you need of woke media bombing for you to believe the statement? Not to mention the common sense reason it's true. First, to be clear, wokeness in entertainment is when the message matters more than the art, which manifests itself with forced diversity and progressive messages in front of and behind the camera. Once again, not that diversity or political messages are bad. It's when they're coerced and poorly integrated into the media. To me, wokeness is inherently bad due to it being so ham-fisted. It only appeals to woke people. Just like Christian films like God Is Not Dead and Left Behind. Only true believers like it. And that's why they mostly fail, because they're appealing to a minority of people, despite being a blockbuster, which is a shitty marketing strategy, like not appealing to your target audience. Or are you saying because Disney isn't currently bankrupt, then they haven't gone broke? So 10 years of consistent bombs and Hollywood's precipitous decline in box office, that if they continue on this course they are headed towards disaster, but until then the statement is void. Is that what you're saying? Because that's one hell of a cope. It's like saying a druggie can't be called an addict because they haven't overdosed.
This brings me to the subject of this video, Will Jordan, aka The Critical Drinker. Tell me, how many times have you heard him say,
"The message"?
What's up everyone, it's your friendly neighborhood Birdman here. Today, I'm going to question why people believe this grifter and show you precisely why you shouldn't. Due to the kinds of people this video is sure to attract, I think I need to put my cards on the table. Firstly, I am not a political type. I rarely, if ever, bring up politics, and when I do, it's usually to make fun of them, left or right. For this behavior, I have been routinely called right-wing and left-wing by people who make politics their entire identity. My position is that political folk are mirror images of each other participating in the Spider-Man meme, where they blame each other for doing exactly what they themselves are doing, something the drinker is heavily guilty of. I think it's silly to adhere to political sides because at some point in time, you're going to have to defend nonsense to maintain the integrity of being on that side. The only side I'm on is reason, logic, facts, science, and math. So believe me, when I criticize this very obviously right-wing chud, I'm doing so out of the spirit and integrity of unbiased media discourse, which is something I care about deeply. Less important, but still worth the mention, I'm not doing this out of jealousy or an attempt to clout chase. I've been calling out a much bigger YouTuber for nearly 7 years. For me, this is simply calling out another bad critic.
Oh, you laugh, it's funny. No? You agree? No.
Everyone believes that they're the only ones who follow facts and logic, and nobody who isn't a fan of your channel is gonna believe you. And based on this video, they're right to. Just get to the evidence, and we can make up our own minds. Again, with the same critical drinker as a right-wing grifter chud insult, which is just a shallow take that immediately shows you're not some I just follow the facts and evidence centrist, or a politically above it all enlightened magnanimous individual. Because if Drinker really was a right-wing chud everyone on the left thinks he is, you and your ilk wouldn't have to stretch to be bad faith, to find statements to do so. You wouldn't have to read into his reviews and essays. He would just out and out say his political takes. But guess what, he doesn't. As a fan who regularly watches his stuff, he rarely delves into real life politics. And from what I've seen, he hasn't said anything that makes him conclusively right. He's anti-woke, which is not the same. The only thing that definitely makes him is not far left. He could very well be moderately liberal, or classically liberal, or center left, or libertarian. But no, because he doesn't like trash like She-Hulk and the Acolyte. That makes him a right-wing grifting chud. Really, dude, your bias is showing minutes into the video. Anyway, just get to the evidence. That's the only way you're gonna sway people that you're right. And while making the bread and butter of your channel going after cinema sins, what an intellectual powerhouse. Just because you criticize someone else, that doesn't make you unbiased. Because most critics do that. I guess then everyone is unbiased. By that logic, because reviewers criticize a ton of movies, that means they can never be biased.
That out of the way, it's difficult to know where to even start with this guy. He is absolutely rich with misinformation, outright lies, and baffling takes that don't stand up to even an ounce of scrutiny. In my last video, I played an excerpt from his infamous Across the Spider-Verse video.
Also, I can't shake the feeling that the script is doing everything in its power to play down Peter Parker, like it's afraid the audience will somehow start rooting for him over Miles if he's shown to be too capable and confident. The first movie portrayed him as an aging, burned out loser who only redeems himself at the end, while the second film morphs him into a bumbling, hapless father in a pink bathrobe who for some reason keeps taking his baby along on life-threatening adventures despite having a perfectly capable mother at home to look after it. Is this some weird attempt to mock and belittle the Spider-Man that most people know and love, who incidentally just happens to be the only straight white man in the entire movie? I don't know, man, it just kinda leaves a sour taste in my mouth, that's all.
The first thing you'll notice if you've seen that movie is that he's just blatantly incorrect. Peter B. Parker is not the only straight white male in the film. In fact, there are many of them, quite a few of them variants of Peter Parker himself. More importantly, there is a prominent supporting character that is the motivation for Spider-Gwen's entire arc in the film. Captain Stacy.
Drinker probably meant a prominent character, one that has more than 5 minutes of screen time.
The next issue you might see is the claim that Peter is being irresponsible by bringing his daughter on, and I quote, life-threatening adventures despite having a perfectly capable mother at home. Again, if you've watched this movie, you'd know that Peter's presence in the film was entirely to be a familiar face for Miles and to help him accept his canon event, not go on a life-threatening adventure.
Wow, is that seriously your defense? So he shows a scene where Peter Parker gives his reason for being there, which is Peter had his daughter because of Miles. So the problem with this is, one, she didn't need to be there to make that point. Second, just because there is a purpose to a character doesn't mean that gives him carte blanche to be a dumbass.
Moreover, May Parker has superpowers, and her dad would likely be the only one in the relationship physically capable of corralling the clearly energetic child. What's more is he brought her to probably the safest environment she could possibly be. A hub with a million other superheroes.
I knew I was gonna regret making her that web shooter.
And your wife doesn't need to know everything.
Did you bring our baby to another fight?
No. Because you asked me not to, so I didn't.
Is it safe?
Is what safe?
Is it safe?
Yes. It's safe. It's very safe.
Don't tell Mom. This is bad parenting.
The less obvious observation is that Will is a race baiter. The Spider-Verse films, while featuring a black protagonist, do not contain the themes of race relations. The more astute of you will then ask, well, why even bring that up at all? And therein lies the problem. Will's goal with many of his film reviews is to galvanize his mostly male, mostly white, and mostly straight audience around the idea that they are being attacked for being those three things. You do this often enough, and the audience will begin to believe it. Hence, that atrocious reading of Across the Spider-Verse.
So Birdman has a hard time talking about the intent of the creators of the film. So if it's not stated in the film, then we're not supposed to notice that prominent white characters in the last 10 years are treated like shit. Name a franchise with a white lead that is brought back, and they're almost all now either pathetic losers, or dead or replaced with a person of diversity. From Luke to Indiana Jones, to Doctor Who, to James Bond, to John Connor, to Sarah Connor, Rocky, Mad Max, Picard, to Ghostbusters, Neo. But no, you're a race-obsessed grifter if you notice this. So when black people notice that they were the first to die in horror films, were they race-obsessed grifters? Or notice any race or sex tropes from a film? Sorry Birdman, film buffs and critics talk about it. But besides that, why didn't you actually disprove the theory? No, it's far more effective to act bewildered.
But it gets even better. Here he is doing the same thing to the Batman.
There seems to be a bit of a debate going on about whether or not this movie is woke, mainly because of the demographics of certain characters. And to be fair, there is a bit of evidence to support this claim. If I was a cynical man, I'd say it's kind of interesting that the rich, corrupt scumbags targeted by the Riddler all happen to be straight, white, middle-aged men, but hey, I guess that's just a total coincidence.
Seriously. What the fuck does this movie have to do with race? He has straight white men in his mouth so often you'd think he was an escort. If he applied even a little of that gray matter, maybe he'd come to the conclusion that most rich people in our society tend to be white men. The Riddler was going after police officers and politicians, and again, in our society, they tend to be white. What Drinker is asking for here is diversity, but only amongst the villains of the film. Moreover, what he's conveniently leaving out is Riddler also attempted to assassinate the mayor-elect, a black woman.
Again, noticing a trend makes you racist. Again, for the slow people in the audience. Most of the people the Riddler goes after are white men that are corrupt and evil. And the one person who isn't portrayed as bad is the black woman. Also, all of a sudden, Hollywood cares about following demographic statistics, despite them forcing DEI and Oscar diversity initiatives. Are you gonna go after them for not following the statistics? Since black people are way overrepresented in Hollywood, despite only being 13% of the population?
If all of this wasn't baffling enough, he himself states this film isn't about race.
And to be fair, Kravitz and Jeffrey Wright both do a great job with the roles they're given, and apart from one poorly judged line from Catwoman right at the end, race never really comes into the picture. So I guess what I'm saying here is that while the movie takes a few little stabs at modern day social issues, it really never dominates the narrative.
Does he even hear himself?
Yes, the film isn't about race, but when you examine the creative's intent, as well as DEI and ESG initiatives that heavily incentivize them to hire for diversity and inject woke messages. Like for instance, you notice if a woman happens to be a villain, she can't be pure evil now. She has to have a tragic backstory, where usually a man put her in that position. And the villain can't die and have a satisfying death. They have to pull their punches, or not show the death by cutting away.
Listen to this incredible leap in logic for Godzilla vs. Kong.
And oh look, Kong's been abducted from his homeland and taken across the ocean to America in chains. I mean, there's on-the-nose writing, and then there's next-level stuff like this. I wonder who you're supposed to sympathize with here.
Yes, Drinker just called African slaves apes and tried to frame it as the screenwriters doing so. That, my children, is what we in the English-speaking world call projection.
First off, the worst thing you can say about this observation is that others have had it before. Look on Google and YouTube, and there are plenty of articles on the connection as well as...
Fuhr ich da mit dem Schiff?
Ja.
Geschah die Reise gegen meinen Willen?
Ja.
Auf der Schiffsreise lag ich da in Ketten?
Ja.
Als ich in Amerika ankam, wurde ich da in Ketten zur Schau gestellt.
Ja.
Bin ich die Geschichte des Nichts in Amerika?
Nein.
Also dann muss ich King Kong sein.
Ah.
So that kind of makes you look foolish to be baffled someone would make this connection. 2, he didn't call slaves apes. You lying, disingenuous clown. He made a comparison, one that many have had.
And like almost every observation this guy makes, it's hilariously wrong. They're not even taking Kong to America. They're going to Antarctica in this scene. So not only did he get the scene wrong, he saw racial themes in a film where there are none because his brain immediately goes to black people when he sees an ape in chains.
And now for the best part. Birdman is framing this like it's from Critical Drinker's review of the film, but it isn't. It's his trailer review. So he doesn't know the context. He's just going off the trailer. I'd call you either disingenuous or ignorant, but then I'm guessing you would just say, well, I never said it was from his review. Which from Mr. Facts and Logic, that's not a good look, Bird Boy.
My last video, I showed a tweet by Drinker that I thought made it painfully obvious what his positions on black people in the media were. What I didn't account for was the insane mental gymnastics people would perform in order to deny that his post was racist in nature.
A human.
This is an unbelievable stupid leap in logic, and once again proves you're not the objective person you claim to be. So Drinker posts a picture from Minecraft and thinks it looks like shit.
Which it is.
That seems to be the consensus even for people who love Minecraft. It looks like a creatively bankrupt bag of piss. But because there's a black woman in the photo, that means Drinker is racist and hates black people, despite there being other people in the image. And his evidence to back up this claim is that because Drinker talks about the creative's intent behind a film, since Hollywood in the last 10 years has been obsessed with woke bullshit, that means he definitely hates black people. And you're seriously gonna talk about mental gymnastics? And you, my friend, are the one in an echo chamber.
So here's a tweet from a different person. If you're unfamiliar, this person is Nick Fuentes, a proud white supremacist. Sounds contradictory, I know, what with being a Mexican and having a name like Fuentes while being a white supremacist, but no one ever said white supremacists were intelligent. The point is, doesn't this tweet seem to be placing emphasis on a specific character in the Minecraft movie? I mean, now that I've told you this person is a white supremacist, it's obvious what his issue is, isn't it? So I'll ask again. What do you honestly think Will's problem with this image was? Do you really believe he's this upset about Jason Momoa's character here?
Jesus Christ, dude, what's your major malfunction? You seriously think that's a good point? You seriously wasted the one brain cell you have in your head on this absolute dog shit leap in logic. So you bring up a tweet from a totally different person, where it's basically only the black person in the photo. Then you go back to Drinker's tweet, who I would like to remind you is not the same person, who has a different picture with multiple people in it, and also doesn't say the same thing. Dude, you would have been better off saying you were a communist, than trying to act like you're a neutral party. This is garbage. So by this logic, if Drinker did the same thing to the Blue Beetle movie, or any movie with a black or brown person, then it would also be racist. Jesus, the brain rot is really strong with this one.
Conservatives do this thing where they'll sit in a room, they'll watch a girl and a guy go into the other room, and they'll hear her screaming for 30 minutes and then come back out like bloodied and bruised, and you'll be like, bro, did that guy just beat the shit out of her? And the conservatives will look you in the eye, dead in the eye, into the ovals of your soul. They will look into you, and they will say, I didn't actually see it happen. Did you? How can you improve that? Like, why would you assume that? Do you even fucking know? Like, they're the most shameless bad faith people need. They're shameless.
That's right, enlightened centrist Birdman brings up a Destiny clip that was supposed to make fun of people who didn't think Drinker's tweet was racist. Yes, a video of an unhinged Coomer gremlin totally doesn't out you as a leftist. Like, is this satire? Is this a joke? Did you actually do this on purpose?
One of the tactics of grifters and their parrots is to attempt to maintain an air of plausible deniability so that when they are criticized for their bigotry, they can hide behind deflections. In my previous video, I brought up one of them, the "but Ripley from Alien" defense. In short, these people try to use examples that match or are similar to the identity of a group that they regularly target to pretend they are not prejudiced against that group. In political discourse, this is probably more well known as, "but I have black friends." We know that doesn't actually work as a defense because we have actual history of slave owners falling in love with their slaves and that male sexists still love their female family members. But when you have sustained and consistent campaigns against certain groups of people, it's entirely reasonable to suggest you have a dislike for those groups. For Will, one of those groups is women.
God, this bird's stupidity is giving me a splitting headache. So someone calls you racist or sexist or whatever. How exactly are you supposed to prove this is untrue? I would love Birdemic to answer that one. It would seem logical, and I know what a fan of logic you are, Birdman, that if you point to examples that are to the contrary, it would seem to be sufficient evidence that you are indeed not that. Also, are you saying certain groups are above criticism? Because it certainly seems like women and minorities are. Be a shame if studios hired minorities to act like a shield. So if they face criticism, they can call these people bigots.
Let's examine one of the most egregious cases of Will's attempts at plausible deniability. On January 5th, 2020, Drinker uploaded a video about The Mandalorian. In it, he had this to say about Gina Carano.
But for the life of me, I'll never understand why they cast Gina Carano. I mean, she's big and burly, and she obviously knows what she's doing when it comes to the fight scenes, but she's a fucking cage fighter, not an actor. Watching her trying to emote is almost as painful as watching Brie Larson trying to be funny. Oh well, it could have been worse. They could have cast Ronda Rousey.
Pretty obvious he dislikes this person and thinks she shouldn't be an actor. Fair enough. However, later that year, Gina got into a string of spats on Twitter that had her facing accusations of racism and bigotry, and she was subsequently fired by Disney. Then, a few months later, Drinker makes a video about Gina so embarrassing, you just have to hear it to believe it.
Gather round, dear viewer, as I tell you a tale. It's the tale of a woman who stood tall in the face of jealousy, cowardice, hatred, and vengeance, and dared to utter a single word. No. It's the story of the girl who wouldn't back down. She fought and won many battles and earned herself great acclaim. But the young woman had her eyes set on a higher goal, and eventually she gave up her life of fighting, travelling instead to the great kingdom of Hollywood to seek fame and glory as an actor instead. And as it turns out, her long years of training and fighting served her well, and soon she was chosen for many roles on the silver screen. Her triumph was cemented when the king and queen chose her to play a soldier, fighting amongst the stars themselves. Her fame was growing fast, but sadly, so was her list of enemies.
This is a flip-flop so insane, it could put Crocs and Birkenstock out of business. If it isn't obvious by now, he has a clear political agenda, and this colors his work. Before he knew she shared political opinions that align with his grift, she was a girl boss, only here to promote Kathleen Kennedy's woke agenda, and shouldn't have even been cast. But now, she's a shield he can use to deflect criticism about his obvious disdain for strong female characters.
Don't take it personal. I just hate women.
So Birdman's evidence that Drinker is sexist is, in the first season he criticizes her, then flip-flops when she supposedly says things Drinker agrees with. First off, that doesn't really track that well as a point. That seems to be more about how he's politically biased more than he's sexist. You would think the obvious evidence would be him disparaging women, and being outright sexist, but because like so many of Birdman's points, he can't do that, he has to reach. Second, there's a problem with your evidence. So the 10 seconds of criticism that you definitely think proves he hates Gina Carano is from his season 1 review in January 2020, and the one where he apparently flip-flops is from February 2021. However, in between these two videos, there's a trailer review in season 2 in September 2020.
It's also nice to see Carl Weathers and Gina Carano coming back again. I'm a big fan of both actors, especially Gina.
And the season 2 review is from December 2020, where he doesn't say anything negative about her. It's almost like he changed his mind about her. Then he makes the video supporting her in February 2021. At best, your point is weak as hell, and at worst, it's a shitty point backed up by even shittier evidence. You'd think Birdbrain would have watched those videos, since he thinks he's superior to Critical Drinker, but I guess not.
Speaking of agendas, the Barbie movie and his subsequent analysis evaporated any hope I had left for this man's integrity. Listen to how he sums up the marketing of the film and then his reading of the actual film's release.
Now, before I dive into this review properly, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work and genius PR campaign of the Warner Brothers marketing department. You guys really pulled off a miracle with this one, successfully duping all of us, including me, into believing that Barbie was going to be just another colourful, light-hearted, easygoing family comedy with some cheeky, self-aware humour, ironic meta-gags, and probably capped off with a blandly inoffensive female empowerment message about girls learning the value of their own potential. What none of us expected was 114 minutes of spiteful, bitter, mean-spirited, borderline unhinged hatred of men and everything even vaguely associated with them. Barbie is like the deformed, mutated rage child of Captain Marvel, Ghostbusters 2016 and She-Hulk. It is pure brain cancer in movie form, and I was genuinely shocked by the sheer, undisguised contempt this film has towards 50% of the human population.
Besides the fact that this is one of the most hyperbolic, nonsensical summations of this movie, how could he have possibly come to that conclusion for the film's marketing? It was plainly obvious that Margot's Barbie was the main character and that she would face an existential crisis.
Do you guys ever think about dying?
On top of that, they show Barbie's feet going flat, suggesting that the film would be clearly feminist in nature, as feminists have been arguing against heels for decades.
Mr. Woods, I will ask you, coming to the end of my...
The marketing material also shows Barbie entering the real world and experiencing sexual assault, and I can only conclude that Drinker's media literacy is questionable at best.
Mr. Woods?
What the fuck? Because they complained about flat feet and there's a butt slap. That means obviously Barbie was supposed to be feminist propaganda. Dude, seriously, what the hell are you smoking? Not to mention this. But no, there was no hiding the radical feminist messages. Because of flat feet. Yeah, you really don't sound like a partisan left-winger at all.
To belabor this point, he's been caught changing the titles of his videos after a media property releases to hide his terrible perception of marketing material.
So I'm a small YouTuber and I don't get this critique. Maybe if it were really pushed to the extreme. In the first title he thought it was dog diarrhea. In the second title he loved it. Which he didn't do, he changed it to a neutral title. Which is smart because you want to entice people to watch the video to see what he thinks. But I change titles to get more engagement as well. You don't? Also, it doesn't change the content of the video. All he can criticize is Drinker's perception of the marketing. Which, wow, what a massive blow. Drinker thinking after one of the worst endings to a TV show in history that perhaps the follow-up wasn't looking too hot. Again, is your arm sore from reaching this hard?
And if all that wasn't enough to prove that Mr. Jordan has the integrity of a sandcastle, here's something that was brought to my attention. On one of Drinker's live streams, he attributed a false quote to Isabella Merced about the failure of Madame Web.
Some of the stars of the film have got theories about why that is, and one of them is right here. Isabella Merced? Is that the word? Merced?
Sure. Yeah.
She said it failed for one simple reason. For the same reason that the Marvels or Bird of Prey failed, because the male audience still hides a deep contempt for everything that is starring strong, independent women.
Oh, God. The truth is the truth, I guess.
Sure. I mean, that's definitely the reason Birds of Prey failed and the Marvels. It wasn't because they were bad films that no one wanted. For sure.
Isabella was, of course, inundated with hate from parrots that took these quotes at face value because why would grifters lie to them? She then had to come out and deny these clearly false allegations, but by then, the damage was already done. To date, there has been no update, no retraction, no public apology on Twitter from Will Jordan for spreading this quote, and that's because he has a vested interest in seeing the culture war proliferate in media discourse, as this is profitable for him. Even if he didn't know the quote was fake, this shows the lack of research and effort he puts into his work. No discernment, no ability to perform an investigation, and hastily attributes an obviously fake quote in a concerted effort to confirm his biases. Why would you take anything he says seriously at this point? How can you trust he's done the homework?
So finally, Birdman actually gets to an actual substantive mistake. Sure, it took him until halfway through his video, which is kind of embarrassing. Of course, he then takes it and tries to make a mountain out of a molehill. Should Drinker have vetted the quote better? Yes. However, it's on a live stream, where they shoot the shit. If you're gonna hold Drinker to a quote that seemed plausible, considering other actresses have had similar remarks like,
Kaling claimed that people's opinions of the movie were skewed by men who don't necessarily value it or don't look at it in the same point of view as a woman doing it, which seems unfair. She also went on to state that if she had to base my career on what white men wanted, I would be very unsuccessful. In order to defend the film, Brie Larson pushed the failure of A Wrinkle in Time onto white men by saying, I don't need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work. It wasn't made for him. I want to know what it meant to women of color, biracial women to teen women of color. Melissa McCarthy has the answer. Men in general. It's jarring in this day and age, she said, that someone, if you said, you ruined my childhood. If a movie 35 years later is ruining your childhood, don't blame us, you've got your own issues. And then concluded by saying, I just don't know why people are so afraid of women. Banks went on the offensive, blaming the movie's shortcoming on, drumroll please, yep, it's men again. Even before its release, Banks said, if this movie doesn't make money, it reinforces a stereotype in Hollywood that men don't go to see women do action movies.
Then you're gonna have to hold to that for everyone, on a live stream flapping their gums. Not to mention you point the finger at Drinker for making mistakes, when already in this video you have made multiple mistakes.
This is not the first time he's been caught manipulating a narrative. The YouTuber Pillar of Garbage exposed Drinker for lying about scenes in Glass Onion because Drinker has a political gripe with Rian Johnson, the director of Glass Onion, and The Last Jedi, a film he and his ilk have pilloried for the past 7 years because of perceived wokeness.
I mean, yeah, but like I said, wokeness is part and parcel of being on the nose, and only preaching to the converted, which is bad storytelling.
Here's a clip.
The example Drinky gives for Rian Johnson's blatant rewriting is the scene where Blanc, and as we later see Helen, spot Duke's voyeurism.
Batista's watching his girlfriend supposedly having an affair with Miles only to be observed by Blanc. Now look at the later version of this exact same scene. Noticed how Helen's been added in here when she totally should have been visible before.
Except no, that isn't true. There's a reason the Drinker plays these clips on mute. Let me put the sound back on for you. That was the first time we see this. There's a close shot of Duke, then we hear the twig snap, and then we pull back to a shot revealing Blanc. Here's the scene as we're shown it later on. We start with this slightly wider shot, revealing Blanc and Helen, then Helen leaves, causing that sound, and Duke turns round. This point is the moment we saw earlier on, and there's a very obvious, very obtrusive sound cue, the sole purpose of which is to communicate precisely this.
Why would Drinker do that? Is he incompetent, or is he a blatant liar? These are the only two choices you have, and both of them are damning for his reputation. And yet, he doesn't seem to care, because I guess his followers don't seem to care.
Again, he pulls the same bullshit. Yes, Drinker made a mistake, but rather than being charitable, he tries to make it like Drinker is either a mischievous ghoul trying to fool his audience, or an absolute buffoon. When one, in the movie the scene is absolutely inconsequential to the overall plot, and two, Ryan is absolutely trying to deceive and manipulate his audience in a really cheap bullshit way. Those two scenes are like 40 minutes apart, so to act like someone would remember the snap is ridiculous. Not to mention Drinker in his reviews for recent releases uses almost no sound from a film, in which it would make sense why he wouldn't include the sound for the scene.
I mean, he publicly demonstrates that he can't keep up with basic logic all the time. Look at this tweet from Star Wars Holocron. They are very obviously making the point that sometimes a show's first season isn't always where it finally ends up, with a couple examples including The Clone Wars and Breaking Bad. When Will saw this, I mean, how do you fail at understanding the point this hard? This is one of two things. He either understands the point being made but is attempting to misrepresent the point to, again, galvanize an already volatile audience against a contentious product, thereby sending his parrots to harass this account.
God, it's one thing to be terrible, but to add unoriginal on top and say the same bullshit, he sent his audience to harass the account. Seriously, do I even need to respond to this warmed over piece of shit argument? Sorry, Birdbrain, unless Drinker personally says to harass an account or a channel or whatever, you can't attribute him sending hate towards them. Otherwise, anytime any channel of size criticizes someone, you can claim the same thing. And I'm sorry that's such a complex concept for you to handle.
He doesn't understand the purpose of an analogy. Stupid people do this all the time. You'll say, well, fish swim and Olympic sprinters run, with the underlying logic being how they locomote, and the stupidest person you know will say, did you just compare a fish to an Olympian? And this is exactly why analogies are on IQ tests. But I'm willing to be charitable to Will and suggest it's the former, that he knows the point that's being made but is misrepresenting it to fit the narrative he's trying to push. I mean, the alternative is to suggest he's low IQ. And I would never do that.
Sorry, Birdshot, but comparing a mud-butt show to the likes of Breaking Bad or other shows of any quality and any capacity is laughable. This show is a train wreck, and unless you get rid of the creative team that was hired for diversity reasons and not merit, more seasons are not going to change that. Not to mention this is rich considering whenever a Drinker makes a point, you give him the least charitable interpretation.
Oh look, Kong's been abducted from his homeland and taken across the ocean to America in chains. I mean, there's on-the-nose writing, and then there's next-level stuff like this. I wonder who you're supposed to sympathize with here.
Yes, Drinker just called African slaves apes and tried to frame it as the screenwriters doing so. That, my children, is what we in the English-speaking world call projection. The point is, doesn't this tweet seem to be placing emphasis on a specific character in the Minecraft movie? I mean, now that I've told you this person is a white supremacist, it's obvious what his issue is, isn't it? So I'll ask again, what do you honestly think Will's problem with this image was? Do you really believe he's this upset about Jason Momoa's character here? His Twitter alone is an embarrassment of narrative pushes, from platform-boosting known anti-black racists like Kang Min Lee to even shit-talking PETA. Because he perceives them to be left-wing, I guess? I don't know, that last one was just amusing to me.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true, since of course you're impartial and not pushing an agenda yourself, but his point is valid. But of course he would go to bat for Assassin's Creed, and ignore historical accuracy when it's convenient. And really you're gonna defend PETA, who everyone hates because they're full of shit? Even liberals hate PETA.
PETA euthanizes 90% of the animals that come through their doors, even healthy, young, adoptable animals. There are innumerable accounts of animals being dropped off with the promise of finding new homes, but instead they were immediately killed. In fact, PETA is against no-kill shelters. And according to ex-PETA employees, they would sometimes steal pets to be euthanized. Take this account from Heather Harper Trohe, who stated in an interview with the Huffington Post that while stolen animals were the minority, it was an acceptable practice, that it was standard operating procedure, and that stolen animals would not be rehomed because they leave a trail. They have literally paid the legal fees for members of known domestic terrorist organizations such as the ELF and ALF. PETA representatives have been quoted saying,
blowing stuff up and smashing windows. I think it's a great way to bring about animal liberation.
They are against any industry using animals or animal products, which, okay, I understand that to a degree. I myself am a vegetarian and I totally respect the vegan lifestyle. But for an organization that euthanizes the majority of animals coming through their doors and routinely disposes of their bodies in dumpsters, I don't know, it just kind of seems hypocritical.
So I bring you back to this tweet. What do you honestly think he's saying here? So far, we've demonstrated he will lie or manipulate a narrative, use a member of a group that he regularly targets as a form of plausible deniability, that he clearly has issues with minority groups, and that he perceives women being in these roles to be a political push. Which of the humans in this image fits all that criteria?
Fuck you! You shit!
You spend your whole video bringing up absolute bullshit arguments and evidence, and trying to act nonpartisan despite clearly showing it the whole way, proving you're the ideologue.
What this person does is not honest critique. He looks for ways he can jimmy in alt-right political talking points under the guise of being a movie reviewer. And I know his fan base doesn't want to believe that he is prejudiced against minority groups, but after everything you've seen here, if you're an honest person, you're at the very least asking questions. Why would he bring up conversations about race in films where that isn't the focus? Why would he lie and manipulate footage of a film made by a person that he politically disagrees with? Why is he spreading misinformation about a woman and attributing political positions to her? What does any of this have to do with film? This is because he's not a film reviewer. He's a political ideologue that complains almost exclusively about mainstream media to push rhetoric. In fact, you'll never see him talking about or promoting anything that's not mainstream unless it's an attempt at a narrative push.
Based on what? What is that based on? Are we supposed to take your word? Not to mention he has a whole second channel, that by the way is twice as big as yours, where he regularly reviews older films.
Okay, well, we didn't know that, so.
Well, now you do, you shit!
Well, we weren't aware. I'm sorry.
Well, now you do, you piece of shit.
So yeah, he'll talk about Squid Game or Kingdom because they're mainstream, but do any of you believe he cares about Korean media at all? You know, because Korean women are probably some of the most feminist on earth, to the point that it heavily contributes to their birth rate decline.
What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
And the swath of strong female protagonists that permeate Korean media properties? He has no idea, because he can only regurgitate talking points against what's in the mainstream, because you can't grift on things people don't know about.
Again, does anyone seriously believe this guy isn't a full-blown lefty? So because South Korean women are feminist, I don't know what the fuck this has to do with drinker thinking. Squid Game and Kingdom are good shows. And are you saying that Korean feminists plummeting the birth rate is supposed to be a brag or a W? Cause that's how it comes off. And that doesn't sound good, my guy. But that's irrelevant. He can still think South Korean media he's seen as good, you weirdo.
This is why his review for season 4 of The Boys is what it is. He admits he hasn't even watched it, yet claims it has destroyed its audience. his source being the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. This is why his review for season 4 of The Boys, he admits he hasn't even watched it.
Seriously, do you hear what you said? You said it was from a review, then said he didn't watch it. Yeah, it wasn't a review and he never claimed it to be. It was his reasoning why he didn't want to review the latest season. Because the show has been trash after season 1. You can say it's not worth making a video for. That criticism is fair. But don't lie and say it was from an actual review of the season.
So, it was off to Rotten Tomatoes for me to check out the reviews. Not the critic reviews, of course, because nobody in their right mind gives a shit what those fucking shills have got to say about anything anymore. I'm talking about the audience reviews, which is the only semi-reliable barometer for quality these days, and oh.
Besides the fact that TV show reviews on Rotten Tomatoes aren't verified, meaning they are subject to review bombs, why doesn't he keep this same energy with, oh, I don't know, The Marvels, Black Widow, or Quantumania, movies that have pretty good audience scores? Seems like Drinker is the living embodiment of this meme, doesn't it?
But notice he said semi-reliable, not always reliable, which means they can be wrong. And considering critics in the last 10 years have completely lost their credibility with consistently giving positive reviews to dog shit, and the whole little Rotten Tomatoes scandal about them paying off reviewers, it makes sense why he would trust the audience, the paying customer's word over a critic. But that's besides the point, because the reason Drinker used the audience score was to illustrate the audience wasn't happy with the show. Also, it's funny people like you never bring up positive review bombs. Yeah, you really are the unbiased bird.
Of course he'll never come out and say, I don't want to see black people in lead roles, or I'm tired of female protagonists, like The Quartering stupidly did. It's because being that he's selling something, he has something to lose, so he has to communicate in dog whistles to maintain the facade of plausible deniability.
Again blowing me away with the originality. He speaks in dog whistles. Well, considering only dogs can hear them, does that make you a dog, bird brain? Or maybe just maybe. Instead, he's just anti-woke. But no, of course not. He's just a secret Yahtzee. That makes much more sense.
And Will, I know you're watching, so let me finally address you directly. Film reviews are not your personal soapbox to air out your grievances with minority groups and those that advocate for them. It's irresponsible to your, my, and every other audience that consumes film and teaches them nothing about the art form. You create a hostile environment for neutral people that may stumble across your slop, where they may assume that film criticism is full of people like you. You do a disservice to the craft and give the rest of film YouTube a bad name. I think I speak on behalf of every reasonable film reviewer out there. Go away now.
God, you're such a delusional, pretentious douche. Great thing about YouTube and working for yourself, rather than, for instance, Hollywood, you can say what you want, and Drinker is allowed to say what he wants. I know it kills hack frauds like yourself, but Drinker is resonating with a large audience that dwarfs you and all other movie critics, because unlike you, he's actually speaking truth to power. Isn't that what you people love to jerk yourself off about? How that's what the left does? Hold the powerful accountable? Except for all the times the left love to say, govern me harder, daddy, and bend over for big daddy government and corporations, as long as in turn they bend over for bullshit like diversity. And not real diversity, only diversity of skin color. And if you disagree with any of the progressive orthodoxy, like say Gina Carano, then see you later, alligator. Not to mention, is it really a virtuous thing when you're only pushing this hard because of DEI and ESG investments? But no, the people against that are the real villains. Sure, buddy, and I have a bridge to sell you. So to wrap this all up,
everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you.
That's a bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. If this was supposed to own or expose Drinker, then you did a piss poor job. The best you could muster was to point out a couple of mistakes, which again you made much more of in this video, which is pretty embarrassing, along with acting like you're not extremely politically biased, which either you're lying to yourself or everyone else, or you're just clueless. Look, I'm a fan of Drinker, but he isn't sacrosanct. He makes mistakes and has takes I don't agree with all the time, but the fact that all these clowns do is try to paint him as a boogeyman, a closeted racist, it just exposes all of you for the snowflake cowards you are.
Please go away. Let me sleep for the love of God.